This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is someone who has a very interesting career. He's an impressive leader and CEO. Under his 25-year leadership, he has led the oldest eye care organization in Texas into one of the largest optical retail networks in the U.S. with several dozen locations and consistently high-performing practices. In 2019, TSO, or Texas State Optical, ranked in the top 10 in optical organizations in the country with practices averaging over $1 million of revenue per location. He's played a key role in transitioning TSO to doctor ownership and has guided its evolution through industry changes while maintaining a strong focus on independent practice success. He's the transitioning president and CEO of Texas State Optical. Please welcome John Marvin. John, welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation because you have a really unique perspective on the industry, and you have a lot of experience with growth. And so what was the most important thing that helped you grow the TSO empire?
I think there was the credibility of the brand, without question. When we started in 2001, I was a part of the initial group there were two doctors and myself that negotiated the acquisition and of the company from a franchisor. At that time, it was pretty much a traditional franchise organization. And we acquired from the franchisor and turned it into a member-owned cooperative. And then the growth plan that we had was to work with young optometrists that were interested in opening their own practice. And the credibility that came with licensing the brand was very appealing to a lot of young optometrists. And so it enabled them to open a practice from scratch and get instant credibility because of the consumer value of the Texas State Optical brand. The company is 89 years. It'll celebrate 90 years since it was founded in 1936 next year. And so that, nothing else, the longevity of the brand had a large familiarity, created a large familiarity in Texas, and it had a good reputation. And so that brand and its value was able to help a young OD establish that credibility, which helped us grow and attract other young optometrists.
Nice. And I'm curious, you guys had a lot of success and growth. Do you think that model would work today? Do you see young ODs wanting to do that and take that mantle if they had the right opportunity?
Well, we've not seen that.
Okay.
We've seen a decided change in young optometrists in the last 10 years. And that is less and less interest in private practice and more of an interest in employment opportunities. And I think that that's the result of several things coming together. But that's what we're seeing is that the number of young optometrists that are 3 to 5 years out of school that are interested in taking on the work of developing and owning a private practice has really shrunk a lot. They're just not there as much as they were 10 or 15 years ago.
Interesting. And your model, I mentioned in the intro a little bit, it's more about, you said licensing, correct?
Yes,
and
brand
not necessarily franchising. So tell the audience who's not familiar, what exactly is the difference between that versus a franchise versus corporate owned? Can you kind of tell us the difference?
Sure. I'll start with corporate owned. Corporate owned is pretty much what it is, and that is corporation owns outright all of the locations and employs the doctors to work in those locations. Some great examples of that is My Eye Doctor. My Eye Doctor owns optometry practices, and they employ America's Best. National Vision is the same. Franchise is a kind of a hybrid between licensing and corporate owned in the fact that a young optometrist or an optometrist would purchase a franchise, meaning literally what they're purchasing is the operational system to operate the practice, along with the value of a brand associated with it. But the real power in a franchise is the operational system, the standard operating procedures, the supply chain relationships, all of those types of advantages that a franchisee gains by purchasing a franchise, along with the power of the consumer brand and the advertising that's done typically by the franchisor. A brand license is um, a relationship between us and our independent offices is they simply license the use of our brand. There is no operational system. There's no standard operating procedures. All of those offices develop those on their own if they are developed, and we simply use the consumer value of the brand, the equity of it, and license that for the use by young optometrists.
And do you, I know franchisees offer a certain amount of money that like 8% or whatever that goes towards a marketing budget. Do you do that for them? Or are they services that you provide with the licensing, or is it really just like the name that they're paying for? I ask these questions because there might be some optometrists listening saying, maybe I can grow my businesses using licensing versus franchise, or look at other ways other than pure acquisition.
Sure, the our contractor relationship is we simply provide the use of the name.
Hmm.
And we provide a support and a resource for the optometrists, but they're free to take advantage of it or not. So all of those support services like marketing
Yeah.
and advertising to help them do a better job locally of marketing and advertising their practice, or training and education of staff, recruiting of staff. All of those services are available on kind of an a la carte basis, but our members that license our brand are they can either take advantage of those or not.
And I know that now I'm going to ask for myself. I've heard of an organization called MSO, right? Managed Service Organization,
Yeah.
where they sort of, I'm not sure exactly how they fit into this. How does that fit into the picture with the structures that we're talking about?
Well, a management services organization is a company that typically contracts with a professional corporation
Mm.
and operates the business on behalf of the professional corporation. So a lot of the aspects of owning and operating a business, a private practice, the business side of it, is not very appealing to a lot of young doctors because of the lack of skills, their lack of knowledge and what to do and how to handle inventory management or human resources, how to develop an advertising plan, handling all the accounting and the billing and the collections, et cetera. And so oftentimes a professional corporate doctor, his professional corporation, will contract with a management services organization that will provide all of those services on their behalf. And they don't, there are two approaches. One MSO model is they don't own anything. It's just a high level general management contract. It's like hiring a very qualified general manager and then letting that person decide who to hire, who to fire, which frames to carry and operate the business. The other aspect or another version of it is that an MSO will own all the assets in the office. They'll own the equipment. They'll buy the lane equipment. They'll buy the prelim equipment, and they'll buy all the computers and operate. They'll own all those assets and simply lease them back to the professional corporation, along with handling all of the operational services. And so they're really two different models in that, but they both are designed to accomplish the same thing, and that is to run the business on behalf of the doctor.
Okay, that's interesting. These might be some things that people are hearing back about for the first time. And by the way,
Yeah,
if you are interested in learning more from John, he's being gracious and he'll give you some contact information at the end of the podcast. So,
yeah.
um, uh, and so, John, let's talk a little bit about the decisions to um, make it transitioning TSO to be more doctor driven. Can you talk about the reason for that, why you decided to do that, why transition to more doctor ownership over the years?
Well, great question. Back in the 90s, um, so to understand kind of why we did what we did, you need to go kind of understand the context and the situation with Texas State Optical at the time. In the early 80s, Texas State Optical was owned by Pearl Vision. And in the mid to late 80s, it was purchased by a group of individuals that had borrowed all the money to buy it. And they were taking it, the franchise model that Pearl had established for TSO, and trying to operate that in Texas. There was a lot of shenanigans that went on with the new owners. And the in 1995, because of a lot of litigation that had been brought against the ownership of TSO by the franchisees, then the bank that had loaned all the money repossessed the company. And so they brought in a company to organize and reorganize, and they did, and kind of put a lot of litigation at bay so they could get reorganized and put it on a path being held by a company out of New Jersey. Ironically, that company ended up buying America's Best and combining it with Texas State Optical in a holding company. And the franchisees, as we were planning, I had begun working with the franchisees in 1993. And so I was helping them with kind of local advertising and marketing efforts. And as we approached 2000, the year 2000, it was owned and operated by this group, that this holding company. And we started doing some planning and goal setting for the year, the new millennium. If you'll recall, back then, you may be too young to remember this, but back in that time, everyone was worried about computers crashing and planes falling out of the sky and so forth. And we were sitting and doing some planning for the new millennium. And the goals that the franchisees had for the organization were such that were obvious that the only way that these were going to be realized is if they owned the company, because the owners at that time, this holding company, really were not interested in investing a lot into the company and so forth. And so the decision was made by a handful, very small handful of doctors, to approach and buy the company. And they asked me to be involved in negotiating that acquisition. And it was in large measure in order to pursue these goals that they had that were heavily influenced by a desire to not be influenced by a corporate entity.
Sure.
I don't want to, I could say it in a different way, like they just wanted to be left alone.
Yeah.
But it was more, being more generous in that, I would say that the plans that they had for the group, they didn't want it to be influenced by a corporate entity. And so it took us about a year to negotiate that acquisition. And in June of 2001, we actually closed on the deal. And I had been brought on with the acquisition company. We set up an acquisition company in 2000, and I was brought on as the president of that acquisition company. And then once we did acquire and close, then we filed a name change and took over the ownership of the brand and the name. But it was largely in pursuit of goals that were very focused on private practice and the ability to really take advantage of the consumer equity of the brand, but use it to the benefit of doctors being able to operate locally, independently, and really let that entrepreneurial spirit take over and develop those practices in those communities.
Interesting. And as far as over time, obviously you've seen a lot of transitions, changes. What's one thing as you were growing where you're growing TSO? What's one thing you ran into that you didn't expect?
Well, my background has been professionally started in consumer research and marketing management. So that's how I met TSO. I was hired by TSO to do an extensive consumer study and series of about 60 focus groups over the course of 2 years, which is a lot, and several thousand interviews. So when you do a level of consumer study like, you become intimately familiar with the company, their strengths, their weaknesses, and so forth. And one of the things I've always believed that's critical is the way that you can see your way forward is to stay close to the consumer, stay close to the customer. And what I've seen over the years is lack of adherence to that important concept in any business, but certainly in the optical and optometry profession industry. There's a mindset that, for instance, when I'm with a group of doctors, a lot of times, if I refer to the patient as a customer, then I'll be corrected. We don't have customers; we have patients.
Yeah.
And I disagree with that because I think that represents more than anything a mindset. Certainly, it doesn't take it's not a disrespect of the professionalism of the optometrist at all. But in the nature of optometry is it is much of a retail business as it is a medical practice.
Mm.
And that reality is something that sometimes is some optometrists or have a difficult time accepting that. So consumers, a customer is somebody that comes in and you build the business experience around. A patient is somebody that takes direction and orders from a doctor. So as a patient, you go to a doctor and you're told what's wrong with you. Here's what you need to do. And I'm going to write, they call it an order. I'm going to write an order for you.
Mm-hmm.
Customers don't get orders. Customers come in and place orders. And that mindset difference is something that I think has the fact that we've lost touch of that over the last 25 years has caused things like Warby Parker to be created, has caused things like e-commerce to take such a bite out of the contact lens business in private practices, taking a ever increasing bite out of the optical sales private practices. Because it's really just a matter of listening to the customer and finding out what is it they want. And then how do we go about designing our practices to deliver that to them and exceed their expectations? And those changes in the customer requirements are something that for many years, all through the 90s and into about 2010, those customer requirements hardly changed at all. And then they began to change as the internet and, if you recall, the iPhone came out in 2007.
Yep.
That changed the way people connected, not only with each other, but also with businesses. And so those types of dynamics that went on in the world of consumerism obviously impacted optometry as well. Along about that time, the consolidation of healthcare began to happen, and hospitals began to buy up private practices of pediatricians, of obstetricians, of family practice, internal medicine. And so you saw this massive consolidation in healthcare that resulted in today less than 1% of medical doctors are in private practice. And in the about 2012 to 2017 window is when that began to really grow in optometry. And it's still growing. It's still last year, according to VSP, less than 5% of practices that were sold to a private doctor. Less than 5%. So it's happening now. And if we don't, as a profession and industry, understand what's happening and then figure out a way to navigate forward, it'll be a tsunami that just overtakes the whole concept of private practice.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the future. Let's take a couple different scenarios. Single owner, one practice. They have a nice practice, good. They make a good living, good lifestyle. they're going to want to
Mhm.
sell eventually, right? Maybe say
Mhm.
around $1 million to $2 million revenue ish. Um, and then you have a doctor who maybe has a couple of locations, and maybe a doctor who has partners and larger organization.
Mhm.
Kind of talk through maybe some of the things that they should be considering and thinking of. For one, let's say someone in their 40s or 50s who still got another 5 to 10 years before they sell. How should they be positioning now if they want to sell or transition? And number two, is it different for any of the sizes? Would you do anything different based off of your experience?
Well, first of all, everybody in private practice today will sell their practice. I mean, at some point they will sell their practice. So and there are different scenarios as to who they will sell it to, who will buy their
Mhm.
practice, but everyone will sell their practice. And so, what one of the things that I've always with optometrists and encourage them to do is understand what you do today is either adding value to your practice when you sell it or taking value away from your practice when you sell it. So, over the course of a life of a practice, there's so much money that will be generated. Let's just pick a number and say that I'll just be crazy. Let's pick a number and say that's $30 million over the life of a practice that'll be generated revenues. And the roughly that's a 25% net on that. That's what it's going to produce. So the question becomes, what do you do with that 25% net? How much of it goes back into remodeling, updating equipment, making sure that you're staying close to your consumer, understanding that, investing in it so that that practice does not deteriorate in its value, it appreciates in the value that it brings and it grows. A lot of optometrists take 25% net and buy a nicer home, buy new cars, travel, and then they get ready to sell their practice and they realize they've got very little to sell. I, I am in touch with brokers all over Texas about people who are wanting to sell their practice. And in some cases, it's very, very sad. Here's something that somebody's poured their life into,
Yeah.
and they've really got nothing to sell. Because by the time you remodel it, you replace the old equipment that needs to be replaced, you might as well just go make them an offer for their patient records and go build and open your own location. Um, so those are whether regardless who you sell to, it's my belief that if you're in your 30s and 40s today, by the time you decide to sell your practice when you're in your 60s, the likelihood is you're going to sell that practice to a corporation. It's very unlikely that you're going to sell that to a young optometrist. Now, if you brought in an associate and you've brought that associate along, let's say you're in your early 50s and you've brought an associate in and they're working with you in the office, part of the agreement in their employment is that at some point you'll sell the practice to them, then you've got a greater likelihood that that will be sold to that associate, young doctor. What we're finding is those young associates that are interested in owning a practice are becoming fewer and fewer. So they'll go to work for you and they'll want a salary from you, but no, I'm not interested in buying the practice from you. So the likelihood is today, out of 100 people that are in practice, the likelihood is the large majority of that group will end up selling it to a corporation. And so if you know that that's probably the reality, then you want to set and figure out, well, how do I optimize the value I get in return for that? And by understanding your buyer, which is a different than a doctor buyer, the corporate buyer is interested in what's called EBITDA, that large net income. So you want to maximize that, especially in the last 5 to 10 years of practice before you sell it. If you know you're going to sell it in 10 years, then you want to start thinking about how do I optimize this EBITDA so that when I go to sell it, I'm going to get the most possible out of it from this corporate buyer, certainly without compromising patient care, customer service, treating employees badly. I'm not suggesting that at all. And I think that there's a misunderstanding that the only way to increase EBITDA is to be abusive to both customers and employees. That's not true at all. In fact, the contrary is more true by being really good and focused with both employees and customers or patients. So I think it's either way. You got to just understand who you're selling it to, and then figuring out a way to position the practice in the best terms in the eye of the buyer.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And so if I'm hearing it right, if you have a larger, so based off of what you're telling me, more than likely the person who's going to want to buy my practice is going to be interested in EBITDA, right? More probability wise, that's the
Yeah,
sellers and buyers.
probably.
EBITDA is probably the number if I'm going to sell. Looking at EBITDA, EBITDA. How many years do you want to show a good EBITDA? Like, what are some rules of thumb that if someone wants to have an exit, what are ways that they can kind of say, okay, well, I've worked really hard. How can I make sure to set up myself for success if I've got like a 5 or 10 year runway right now?
So keep in mind that the buyer, let's talk for terms of corporate buyer. The corporate buyer will pay you based on EBITDA.
Yep.
But what they look for is underdeveloped EBITDA.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay. So if let's just for sake of this discussion say that you've got a practice and you're pulling 30% out of that practice net. That's pretty good. And that means that you're operating pretty tightly, pretty efficiently. You've got pretty good cost of goods profiles. And so if I'm going to buy it, then I'll pay you a multiple of that. But the upside potential for me of that is much less than if you've got a $2 million practice and you're taking 20% out of it. And I'm looking at it and saying, man, I can get in there in about 90 days. I can move that 20% to 30% because I've got better buying deals. I can I can lower my cost of goods. You've got 15 employees running around when you really only need 10. I can start looking at the ways to create efficiency. And so I'm willing to pay you a higher multiple of that 20% because I know that I can move it more quickly to 30.
Mm.
If it's already at 30, it's going to be much more difficult. So I will pay you, in all likelihood, lower multiple of that. But from a seller standpoint, you've got a very good practice to sell. So the buyer will want it, but it puts you with more leverage and in a better position to get the maximum out of it than if you are a less efficient operation. Because instead of getting 8 times of 20%, you might get 6 times of 30, or you could hold out. You're just in a better position. You've got more leverage because you've got a better run business. And that ultimately, that's what they want. They want well-run businesses.
Yeah, and some of those caveats I've heard is, hey, the doctor has to be replaceable. Right. That's one of them. What are some of the other things that constitute a well-run business in your mind?
Good management structure. You've got a good office manager that's not just a manager in title. A lot of offices have Betty is the manager, but her only qualification is because she's been there longer than anybody else. And whatever seems to happen, she won't leave.
Yeah.
So we'll make her manager.
So hopefully you didn't offend half the listeners. So
No. I'm sure the people who listen to you are the opposite of Betty.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are on top of their game because that brings a lot of value to a practice. Is a competent and manager who knows how to operate a practice. Now, given that, you got to have a doctor that understands how to manage a manager. Because what we see all the time is a manager will be given a lot of responsibility, but very little authority. And you can't do that because you put that manager in kind of a no-win situation where you're going to hold them responsible for operational activities, but you're not going to give them any authority over that. But a well-run and well-managed office and have a team of good people, competent opticians, that staffing team is an asset that a buyer will evaluate and put into it. The doctor, they need to be able to say, what happens when that doctor walks away? Is that business still going to be there?
Mm.
Otherwise, we're going to lock that doctor into 5 years and put in a transition plan so that in the end of that 5-year period, that doctor will be able to walk away and will be able to keep the business. So those are equipment. Does the equipment need to be upgraded? Is it still a very old manual four-opter, or is the office digitized? Is it running with digital competency or capabilities, or is it running like it did in the 1980s? So all of those are types of things that a buyer will look at in helping to determine what they're willing to pay for it.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. And if you were to start now in the industry, how would you quote unquote grow an empire? Just curious, based off your years of experience and what you see in the marketplace, what do you see as some opportunities? How would you practice? How would you best serve the customer and the patient? The same person as both.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your how would you do that in today's market?
Well, the thing that's driving consumer behavior today when it relates to optometric services is convenience. And the consumer does not, they view the doctor's side of things. I'm talking about from a distance. So if I've just arrived in your community, your town, and I'm looking for an eye doctor, I'm going to go about different ways of trying to find one. But one of the things that is going to be very important to me is convenience of location, convenience of getting access to the office, how quickly can I be seen? And because on the list is the quality of the care and the doctor, but there's a tendency to view that as pretty much commoditized
Mm.
because it's a licensed service. So if you're good enough to get a license from the state of Texas, then I'm probably going to get a decent eye exam because what I'm looking for is a new pair of glasses or contact lenses. So then I began to look for, well, how close are you? Are you open on Saturdays because that's the day I need to get in? Or are you open late in the evening? I commute back and forth to my job and I don't want to have to take a half a day off of work just to go to an eye doctor. Is it convenient to go to your office, or am I going to spend 2 hours, 20 of which waiting for my appointment, and then the long process of actually shopping and deciding what I'm going to buy? Another is the convenience of the pricing model. One of the things we hear all the time is people are intimidated to buy glasses because they don't have any idea what it's going to cost them in most private practices. They'll come out, they'll pick a frame, they like it. It's a $199 on the frame. All right, that's okay. I can deal with that. And then they're told these glasses are $900, and they're going, "What happened in between? How did it get to $900?"
Yeah.
And it's all of the, well, your insurance didn't cover this, or your vision plan didn't cover this, and this is an added feature and a benefit of the
Yeah.
non-glare coating, and all of these things that, as a consumer, I don't understand, and uh, and so that's intimidating. And so those are all the things that kind of work against. So if I were starting a practice, I would address all those things. I would identify a location that is convenient to a large community of households, particularly households that are between 30 and 50 years of age
Hmm.
with families.
Okay.
And then I would set up a pricing model that makes it super simple. So when you come to see us, it's real easy to know exactly what you're going to pay. If you call us and you want an appointment within 48 hours, you can get on the books and we'll see you. We're not going to tell you, well, our first opening is in 4.5 weeks. We're going to make it convenient for you to get in. I would definitely be open Saturdays, and I would probably, as much as I could stretch my staff, have extended hours. Two days a week, I'd be open till 7 o'clock at night
Hmm.
because I would accommodate the retail aspect of the practice. The medical practice side of it, the consumer doesn't have any ability to evaluate that. And so as long as you're professional and you conduct yourself in a professional manner, I definitely would wear a white coat because that's the universal message and uniform of a doctor. I definitely would do that because patients appreciate that. And then I wouldn't wear scrubs. That looks like people showing up in their pajamas. And the people that are selling the eyewear, they would look like they're professional in fashion, and they're professional salespeople that handle fashion items, and be knowledgeable about it. So it's kind of basic stuff on Kit, where
Yeah.
you've got well trained people that handle the retail aspect of it in a manner that consumers appreciate and value, and then the clinical side, you understand they don't know how to evaluate that, so you have the presentation that creates that confidence and assurance that the professionalism is there and the quality is there.
I like that. Uh, so I'm curious. Let's talk a little bit about what makes you tick and what makes you you. Can you share with me a story that formed you and who you are? Like, hey, it could have been like when you're younger days, but something that stands out to you viscerally. Like, oh yeah, that's a good story that explains how you tick.
Well, gosh, I don't think we've got time, but as it relates to the topic at hand, I will say that when I got involved in the first consumer research study that I was ever involved with, that was that was really life changing for me and the way that I view business. And I didn't understand it. When I was in school and studying marketing, we did a whole course, a semester on consumer research. And that study was largely statistics and variance and all the modeling that goes into understanding the results of the study. But when I was out and I was involved in the first study that I did, where we actually talked to consumers, both quantitatively through surveying and questionnaires, but also qualitatively in focus groups, I was just blown away because I'm thinking, this is like cheating. If I want to be competitive and I want to outperform my competition, all I've got to do is be a better listener to what these people are telling me they want and give it to them. And and that just seemed to be such a no-brainer to do because and then I began to understand it. It's like when you go in to buy I'll use buy a new car, you'll be met at the door by someone who will say hi and introduce themselves, and they'll say, "How can I help you?" That's a research question, and so you'll say, "Well, I'd like to buy a new car." All right, now I know I'm selling cars, not trucks.
Mm.
And so, what kind of car are you looking for? And you'll tell me. And do you have a family? And you begin to ask questions, and the customer begins to answer those questions. And all of that helps the person who's selling those cars be better able to give you what you need and meet your requirements. And it's such a simple concept, and it doesn't have to be expensive. Every eye doctor and office manager that's listening to this can begin today to do some research, and starts with just walking up to people who are in your office and going, if you got a few minutes, I'd like to just ask a few questions. And if they say sure, then you say, how is it that you began to come here? What was it that caused you to select us? And then listen to what they have to say. And if they say something you don't quite understand, ask them to explain it. And then ask them things like, how long have you been wearing glasses? Have you ever worn contacts? Why haven't you worn contacts?
Mm.
If you weren't going to come to us, who would you likely go to? And just begin to learn and understand your market.
Mm.
And the more you understand your market, the better able you are to provide what that market needs or wants.
Yeah.
And so that learning and experience that I had of really going through that whole customer research experience, that really changed my whole approach to business. And that applies to whatever industry we're talking about. It isn't just optometry.
I love
It
it.
applies to everything.
That's really good insights. And And so, John, if people want to continue this conversation and learn more from your wisdom and what you're doing nowadays and what you have next on the horizon, where can people connect with you?
Probably the easiest way is my LinkedIn profile. And you just go to LinkedIn and do a search for John Marvin, John D. Marvin, and they can find me. My email address, I can give you an email address
We'll put it in
that,
the show notes, whatever you want to put in there.
okay,
Yeah.
um, then they can reach me by email, and I'd be happy to respond and reply. And if they want to, I'll get on the phone and visit with them.
Which email would you like to leave?
At JDMarvin at mac.com, mac.com.
JD. All
And
right.
just drop me an email and I'll reply. And if you'd like, we can get on a phone call together.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you again for being a guest on the show.
You bet. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. I hope there was something there of value.
I thought there's a lot. It was really good. We could probably do another couple hour sessions like this, to be honest. And thank you, audience, for listening. If you learned something today, please share the video on YouTube or the podcast with your friends and subscribe. Thank you again, John. And this has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Take care. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.